Welcome, everyone. You're listening to the ImPerfect Podcast. I'm Kathy.
And I'm Kennedy. Join us on this week's episode as we discuss intriguing topics and people of interest that will inspire us to explore all of the unique pieces of ourselves.
We are all imperfectly perfect.
We're glad you're here. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the ImPerfect Podcast. Thank you for tuning in again. Mom and I were talking before we started recording, and we've gotten a lot of feedback recently, I mean, throughout the whole process, but been getting direct messages from people and talking about the impacts of our messages and our episodes. So thank you so much for reaching out. We love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, pretty cool. People that had been struggling with some things in their lives, and for whatever reason, something we said made them take a step towards whatever direction they decided to go. So yeah, it's kind of neat to hear those kind of things back.
It is great to hear, and it also helps us because we're amateurs at this. Yeah, right. It's good to hear that we are making an impact and that things that we are saying are resonating with people. So yeah, it's great to hear.
Yeah, share it on your pages, and that'll help it get out and maybe touch some other lives as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so today we have a large topic we want to cover, and lots of information, great information. It's what is an inner child, and interestingly enough, I thought that I knew what an inner child was, because for my age group specifically, and in and around there, it's become quite trendy to hear the word inner child, and I thought I knew what it meant. You know, it was one of those things that you want to reconnect with your younger self and feel alive again and all of these sorts of things. And come to find out, it's more than just that base level that we hear about on social media a lot. And Mom had said that she doesn't see it as much as I do because she's in a totally different age bracket, right? So
pretty much haven't heard the term for 30 years.
Right. And so on that, Mom actually did a thesis, come to find out,
I did.
however many years ago. Anyways, she was the one that introduced me into the more, I don't know the proper word to say, but it was more than I had realized. So maybe you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so I guess the best place to start is what the inner child is. It's actually part of your subconscious that has been recording your whole life, things that you didn't even know were going on in your brain. It's kept track of all those things, your memories, beliefs, even emotions you felt at that time. The concept actually came from a Swiss psychologist or psychiatrist, sorry. His name was Carl Jung, and he linked the concept of the internal child to past experiences, memories, and like a more innocent time, you know, the playfulness, creativity, and, you know, when we were kids and had hope for the future. So it's not just an expression of your child self, it's actually your lived experiences, and they all stay in your subconscious.
Mm-hmm. And some of our memories can be warm reminders of positive experiences we've had. Like I think of the smell of grandma's cookies, or, you know, shows that we watched specifically on certain days of the week. But it can also store the not so good memories too, like the time your pet went over the rainbow bridge, or when you got left out of your group of friends. So we're molded by the experiences that happened to us in childhood, whether positive or nurturing or painful and traumatic. So yeah, these early experiences have a significant impact on how we see ourselves and how we behave as adults, and because they create imprints that have lasting impact on our lives.
Right. And depending on your experiences, that little person that lives kind of, it's not really like, it's not a split personality or anything, but it's just kind of like your subconscious mind that's really actually driving the bus. A lot of people don't realize that, but that little person that lives inside your subconscious mind, and the one that had those early experiences, basically, he's sitting back there and kind of deciding some things in your life that maybe you don't want decided, but it's his job, to his or her job, I guess, to protect you and avoid perhaps painful experiences that had happened to you in your past. So some people's inner child is fairly content and happy-go-lucky, the experimental person that lets you have some curiosity and fun memories in your life. But then there's the other side of the coin, some people that maybe don't have great experiences and great memories from their childhood, and that can be a completely other story.
Right, and talking about it being this little person, so to speak, in your mind and in yourself, why won't this little kid shut up, so to speak? Why does it keep coming up, things randomly from our past?
Yeah.
So the inner child and its experiences actually become a part of our psyche for life. And although the inner child was meant to be that spontaneous, energetic, and playful, embracing part of us, it sometimes ends up repressing and shutting down and sabotaging our best self, interestingly enough. And this is the side of the inner child that I don't see so much on social media and, the fads
Mhm.
that are happening. It's more about reconnect to your inner child because it's a positive experience, but sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah,
Uh,
everything that we've experienced basically has been stored back there and colored by whatever tint was put on it at the time. Was this a positive thing? Was it a negative thing? And it forms a lot of our unconscious beliefs rather than the actual reality in our life. It's kind of a bizarre, rose-colored glasses or black-colored glasses phenomena. And like I had said earlier, it's that subconscious's uh, purpose to keep you safe. So sometimes you can see things come up in your life. We've all experienced it, I'm sure. Fear, resistance, avoidance to something that sometimes you're not even sure why that's even there, but
mm.
it's actually your inner child and your subconscious mind telling you that's an unsafe situation based on something you've experienced in your past.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's kind of you perceive an unsafe situation, so it's automatically your past self coming out and going, "Oh, I
Yeah.
recognize this." So the part, like I was saying, that we don't hear about is what is known as the wounded inner child. And
Mhm.
Mom introduced me to a man named John Bradshaw.
I didn't
So,
introduce you to him
well, you know what I'm getting at.
because he's passed away, but
Yeah.
yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, passed away in 2016, but he was an educator, a counselor, a motivational speaker, and he was actually an author who was active in the self-help movement of the 80s and the 90s.
Yes.
So John Bradshaw mixed Carl Jung's work with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the ages and stages of Erik Erikson's personality development scale to expand the initial concept of the inner child to the wounded inner child. So his
Yeah.
his work was based on the theory that gaps and the lack of fulfillment of needs along with negative experiences in childhood can cause maladaptations throughout one's life.
Right.
Yeah.
So so babies are born into the world and we're totally dependent on our parents for love and our needs, our shelter. Unfortunately, some kids are born into situations where their parents are ill-equipped. They didn't learn these lessons growing up. So what do I do with this baby?
Mm,
Sometimes it ends up with kids not having their needs met or being actually even harmed by those who were intended to protect them.
yeah. Yeah, so when parents fail to provide these needs, the emotional, the psychological, the physical shelter, all those sorts of things, it
Mhm.
can result eventually in adults who are stuck in trauma and remained just ruled by an inside force and what is known as essentially the wounded inner child.
Right. And don't get us wrong here. It's not I mean, I'm a parent myself, and I'm not looking to point the finger at parents. Um, it's just in some cases we perceive events
Mm,
in our own minds in certain ways. I'm sure that most of our parents did the very best they could with the resources they had, but kids still sometimes experience inner child wounds that affect them throughout their lives.
Yeah, so the wounded child is a model of negative emotional patterns that an individual has experienced as a child. So these wounds can come out through physical abuse, mental, emotional, sexual. There's neglect or trauma. And most often they occur before the individual reaches the age of 7. So though this isn't always the case and can progress past this age up to adolescence, the ages between, essentially 0 and 7 are the most influential.
Right.
Yeah.
And when there is trauma that creates a wounded inner child personality in your subconscious, it can cause a lot of trouble to the adult, as I had mentioned earlier, dealing with emotions and relationships with other people. Sometimes there's addiction, self-concept issues, and dealing with life in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, having this little, you can imagine fearful, angry, jealous, critical, emotionally hurt child who's kind of driving the bus from the back seat there. It can really merge into what you're wanting to do in your life, or what the logical feeling or response might be. And it can end up clouding your thoughts and feelings. It can even trigger some stuff from your past. Some people have a lot of triggers in their lives, and perhaps this is where they're coming from. It can really interfere with your reasoning and ability to make decisions effectively.
Yeah, I was gonna give the example of a filter almost. It kind of filters your view. It's yeah, it creates this extra barrier when you're trying to perceive a real life and right this moment, right now situation. Your your younger self, what has happened in the past, those experiences can greatly influence how you experience and how you perceive present situations.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
So John Bradshaw came up with a mnemonic formula that goes along with the word contaminate. And each letter in the word contaminate stands for a word that would describe the wounded inner child personality type or archetype, basically. So the C would stand for codependence. Then we have offender behavior, narcissistic disorders, and manipulation of others, trust issues, acting out or acting in behaviors, magical beliefs, intimacy dysfunctions, no discipline behaviors, addictive compulsive behaviors, thought distortion, and emptiness like apathy and depression. Those are words that he came up with to describe uh, the markers of what the wounded inner child actually could be going through.
yeah, and to further that thought, we actually have a list of just some signs that could be indicative of a wounded inner child, sorry. So maybe we'll read one for one back and forth,
Sure,
'cause
there's a lot of them here.
yeah, yeah. So, one is a deep feeling that there is something wrong with you, so that could be defined as a people pleaser.
Yeah. If you're not able to let go of possessions or people, maybe you're a hoarder even.
Yeah, in extreme cases, if you struggle with or feel guilty for setting boundaries. So this can be to avoid conflict.
Right. If you're super driven or an overachiever, perfectionist, that type of personality type as well.
Yeah, if you have problems starting and finishing tasks, it's can also be anxiety in new situations.
Right. Or a deep distrust of others and large fear of abandonment.
If you are a rebel and feel alive when in conflict with someone else,
Yeah. Or constantly criticizing yourself or others.
or you feel ashamed at expressing emotions or ashamed of your body. So essentially, everyone. I think everyone can kind of
Check, 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 and
Yeah.
check. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and we're not done. So
Yeah.
next we have addictions like overeating, alcoholism, sex addiction, drugs, gambling, over shopping, overstimulation, internet, phones, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, you need to always be in control, so you have lack of trust in others.
Yeah, or perhaps you have the never enough syndrome. It's an ongoing need to be admired and validated by others.
Repeating the same relationship mistakes over and over instead of considering your part in it. So there's a quote of, if you meet a jerk in the morning, then you've met a jerk. And if you've met a jerk all day, maybe it's you that's the jerk. Yeah.
That can be true. How about fearing abandonment and inability to be alone? We see this sometimes in people who always need a boyfriend or always need a girlfriend.
Yeah. Never can be alone. Difficulty and confusion in knowing what you want or how you feel.
Difficulty expressing emotions.
Getting triggered and defensive or emotionally volatile, so acting like a child. So you'd be lashing out, blaming, inflicting cruel punishment on others as retaliation to get back at them, so to speak.
Right. If you're a people pleaser.
Social anxiety.
Over competitive.
Fear of making mistakes, so procrastination.
I see your fear of making mistakes and I raise you fear of anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and there's just a few others: fear of anger, fear of trying new things, difficulty setting boundaries or saying no, and repetitive situations. So long list. And I mean, this might be a little presumptive, but I think everyone can kind of see themselves somewhere in that list. I have multiple myself, so yeah.
Right. Kind of like the Grinch. He went to live on top of Mount Crumpet or wherever it was. Yeah, because his feelings were hurt, right? That's basically what the whole story was. And
great comparison. Yeah, when he was younger.
They were, yeah, that incident happened at the school gift exchange or whatever. And he held on to that and made excuses in his mind why he couldn't go down there, and then he hated them and they were trying to be kind to him.
And there's that famous scene of, yes, I'm going. No, I'm not going. You know what? I don't even know what to wear. You know what? I'm not going. So coming up with excuses.
We just watched that the other night.
Avoidance of the situation. That's a whole other one. So yeah, that's a good comparison actually.
So we were going to talk a little bit more about the repetitive situation category. Basically, our body always keeps track. It doesn't forget a thing. I mean, you might not remember it up in your conscious mind, but that's like less than 5% of your brain going on. The rest is this guy back here. So your body does keep a record of your internal childhood experiences, and if you perceive those to be wounds or what have you, and it keeps going through that emotional garbage, and somehow it finds ways to creep back into our lives until we deal it and resolve those issues. Excuse me, types of wounds and types of relationships that we further attract into our life as we go through living our life. It's almost like a big magnet that brings those original wounds back in our life again. It's like we subconsciously recreate those unhealthy dynamics indefinitely until we look after the patterns. So doing some inner work and having a greater awareness of trying to actually, I mean, I know it's no fun, but embracing that pain and get rid of some of that crap so you don't keep bringing it back in the house type of thing.
Yeah, and how interesting it is, I find it's easier to pick out those repeated behaviors in other people, and it's harder to see it in yourself because you're living it, right? So there's certain types of wounds and types of relationships we attract into our life, and they generally mirror the original wounds from our childhood. So think of abandonment, for example. If you were abandoned for, you think immediately as a parent, but it could have been a grandparent or just, anyway, abandonment. And then later on, you're feeling like Mom was saying about you always need someone around. So you always need a boyfriend or girlfriend. You can't be alone because you don't want to be abandoned. So just as an example.
Yeah, it's true. Unless you get through those type of things, you could keep bringing them back. I mean, I've got a little 4-thing list here. if you've experienced guilt, if that was a wound to you as a child, then you will attract people that make you feel guilty. If you felt abandoned as a child, the wound would look like you attracting more emotionally unavailable people into your life. If you had trust issues, you'd end up with people that don't make you feel safe. Or if you were neglected, you can bring in people into your lives that don't appreciate you and make you feel kind of unworthy, unseen. So
Hmm.
it's like you're living it over and over again. So
Hmm.
I guess the premise here is you can't just get over it or get, around it. You pretty much have to go through it.
Yeah, yeah, great way to put it. It's more of a discovery process. It's not a point the finger process. So it's like Mom was saying, it's you don't go around, you have to go through. That's a good way to put it. So I mean, I'm sure we're not the only ones. I mean, I had a pretty great childhood from my memory, but no one has a perfect childhood. Everyone has unresolved and unconscious patterns of their own.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question is, how do I reach my inner child? So you don't have to look at this child as a person separate from yourself. Mom was saying this little person. So it's not separate from yourself. Instead, consider them a representation of your past experiences.
Yeah.
So anyone can get in touch with their inner child and benefit from this process.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you eliminate stress and frustration and triggers and allows you to deal with others more effectively as well, and why they might react in certain ways in certain situations. You might better understand them.
Yeah, not only them, but yourself and
Right.
why, I'm sure we can all relate to times in our lives where we've reacted and then after the fact thought, why did I do that? Or what,
Right.
that's so not typical of me. And again, in your conscious mind, perhaps not, but, sitting in the back seat
Yeah.
giggling
Yeah,
is,
exactly.
is the kid driving the bus
Yeah.
again. So.
Yeah.
There are 4 easy ways to access your inner child. Actually, you can look to kids for other children for guidance.
Right.
They're so carefree, and playing with them can help you rekindle your memories of childhood sometime. Um, Even watching movies or television shows that you like to watch when you were a child can help stir up some of those feelings or memories that maybe you want to get in touch with again.
Yeah, and you can also revisit childhood memories. So photos and other mementos can help you tap back into the emotional space reflected in the image in the past. So you might see a parent or sibling in the photo, or you might see a certain t-shirt you had on that you remembered. I remember specific clothing from when I was younger. So to think of those things, it brings me back. You can also ask family and friends for stories that they can share with you. So this is like a reminiscing sort of situation where you might evoke feelings and memories that you'd completely forgotten about.
Hmm. You can also do things that you enjoy, things that brought you joy in childhood. Maybe you used to like to go with your friends and do picnics in the afternoon.
Mm.
Um, Swimming at the local gravel pit. Those are both like kind of
I
examples
was
for
gonna,
me.
yeah, I
Like,
was gonna say the
Mom, this
gravel
is
bit.
your life. So yeah, or maybe you spent hours biking or played ball hockey. I don't know what your thing was, but yeah, if you go back to doing some of those things, I think we had mentioned those in almost every episode so far in
Right.
trying to reconnect and find things you did like to do when you were younger.
Yeah. And the point is these are things that you didn't have to do. It was stuff that you enjoyed to do and you just did it because you enjoyed them. And it's funny how we become adults. Well, it's not funny, but we become adults and we lose those little bits of ourselves as we've mentioned before. But we've all been there, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
we're just Mom and I are trying to share the message of to get back into those things because it's beneficial in many respects.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well.
Yeah.
So another thing you could give a try would be using expressive media, coloring, doodling, sculpting, that sort of thing. That can actually stimulate different areas of the brain. And when you allow your active mind to kind of go numb there for a minute, sometimes you can have emotions surface that kind of, are going in the direction of where you're wanting to be and reconnecting.
Yeah, and the point is that adults can't return to their childhood, and they just have to begin again for, you know, there's this thing called self reparenting, and it's done. Maybe you want to speak more on it, Mom. She had done a thesis years ago, and she knows a bit more
Well,
on it.
I just want to, the only thing I changed about what you said was we had just recently, like the 4 pointers that we gave in reconnecting to your inner child. That's kind of more a groundwork for people who had mostly positive experiences. On the other hand, where we can also be looking at people who didn't have positive experiences and know full well that they have a whole bunch of baggage sitting back there.
Right.
And as you were saying, adults can't return to your childhood, but if you really suspect that you have a wounded inner child, that you want to independently go deeper and maybe see if you can deal with some of that stuff yourself, there's actually a technique called self-reparenting. It was come up with by a psychotherapist named Muriel James. She was the one that developed that idea. And the inner work develops a greater awareness in embracing your pain. It's difficult, but it will help resolve a lot of the issues that we spoke here of today. It can, reparenting essentially is just simply giving yourself what you didn't receive in your own childhood
That's how
from
I think
your
of it. Yeah.
from your original parents or caregivers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how I think of it. I didn't know how to describe, but I think of it like you're essentially reparenting yourself now that you've become an adult. It involves learning to give yourself love, respect, and dignity that you deserved when you were young, but maybe didn't get.
Mhm.
So, this process can help make it easier to understand your adult experiences so you can heal from your pain in the past, defeat the old negative tapes playing in your head, learn to self partner. So, essentially become your best friend, your own best friend, and
Mhm.
handle any future challenges with self compassion. So, just the awareness of your child self can also help you regain a sense of joy and wonder in your adult life.
Right, because if you have had really bad experiences, we have the tendency to put that away and not look at it anymore. So you're probably missing some good memories in with some of that stuff. So we do have some reparenting steps if that's something that you're looking to go into a little bit further. So we're looking at an age focus mostly younger than 7. Uh, Look at the innocence of that little person. Imagine yourself when you were young. I've also heard of the activity of putting a picture of yourself at that age on the mirror,
Hmm. Hmm.
just to
Yeah.
kind of remind yourself that, you know, there there is a little person still kind of living in there.
Yeah. And that's often what I see actually on social media is, put a picture of your younger self in some mirror or something you're going to see every day. So you're reminded of, oh, there's little Kennedy or whatever. But to visualize those things, it's hard for me personally, just speaking about myself here. I find between the ages of, essentially 0 and 7, it's hard for me to remember stuff that happened way back then.
Mhm.
Some people don't have as many issues as thinking of things when they were younger, that young at that. But I find it's harder for me to think of things. So I don't feel that I'm alone in that. But Mom gave a great tool as well as something you can think of is think of a toy that you had when you were younger. And so I can easily think of a blanket that I had when I was little. And you start with the blanket and suddenly you're thinking about another event and you're thinking of the next, and that's kind of how you go down that path of visualizing and being in that space of between 0 and 7.
Right. You can also write a letter to yourself, something that I know it's kind of weird to talk about, but dear little Kathy, you don't suck as bad as you thought.
Yeah.
That sort of a thing, to just give yourself acknowledgement. Maybe you didn't get that growing up. Hopefully you did, but sometimes it's strange to imagine us going back and being our parent to ourselves, but hey, if that's a need that needs filled and this simple technique could help you, then why not?
Yeah. And you need to allow yourself to feel emotions. So
Oh yeah.
all the time we're shamed for crying, or we're not permitted to express anger. Like our emotions are supposed to be suppressed. Like what's about that?
Did I
Um,
shame you for crying?
Not me, but I know very much in society, men are,
Oh yeah.
looked down upon if they shed any tear. Like, where did that
Right.
come from? Why is that a thing?
Suck it
Um,
up, walk it off. Yeah.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, men aren't the only ones with sadness. I mean, we're supposed to toughen up in life and not show our emotions out in public. We're supposed to keep that to ourselves. But every
Right.
emotion is valid and it has purpose. Sadness is an emotion that can allow us to heal, and anger is one that may have been boundaries. Like anger might have be coming out because of boundaries that have been violated in the past. And so
Right.
something similar happens and you react with anger. But
Yeah.
unprocessed emotions can block the energy of the body. So you
Hmm.
need to allow yourself to feel those.
Yeah, yeah. So also meeting your inner child needs as an adult can include things like if you felt neglected as a child, maybe join a support group for people who will accept you the way you are.
Hmm.
Also, take a listen to yourself and see, maybe you're talking negatively to yourself, calling yourself names that maybe you're bullied with,
Hmm.
or other things from your childhood. Uh, I don't remember particularly being bullied by myself, but I know there's a little voice in there, not a little voice. Sometimes she's loud, and sometimes I have to tell her to shut up. But I only learned that in the
Yeah.
last few years, that voice of, oh, you'll never, or, oh, of course you didn't, or, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And in turn, you can use positive affirmations, excuse me, like I'm a good person. You are
Mhm.
unique and special. It's okay to make mistakes, things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, and get more in tune with your emotions. Maybe integrate the parts you've disowned and look at some of your triggers, places where you've had strong judgments. And, some people like to say, "Oh, I just feel that way because I feel that way." But why do you feel that way? And
Right.
that opinion was formed at some time. Is it you don't want to look at the other options because that makes you feel safe where you're sitting? You can also work on unlearning learned behaviors, things like, let me think for a minute. Some people believe that they always need somebody by their side. They can't do anything by themselves. Or the previous example to, I always need a boyfriend. If I don't have a boyfriend, I'm not somebody, or,
Mm,
you know, that sort of
yeah.
thing.
And children, ironically, are often shushed or punished for showing too much emotion, but the body never forgets that experience.
Hmm.
So, unprocessed emotions can be stored in the body, even if we don't realize it, and it can manifest into more complicated conditions and maybe even physical illness later in life.
Physical illness and mental illness as
Yeah,
well.
that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
So meditation's another thing that you could look at doing. You need to give yourself time to do that and not have interruptions. I would say you need at least 15 minutes. You can think back to when you were younger, your earliest memory.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's hard to come up with. So maybe think about the room that you had as a child, or a special toy, places you used to go, things like that, that will just kind of get your memories flowing a little bit.
Yeah.
How were you feeling in that moment? Was there other people around? Was it happy? Was it sad? How did that feel for you? Was there an emotion, if it was a little bit of a sensitive time, was there an emotion that was established? Maybe you fell down the stairs and you were embarrassed. So now in groups of people, you become embarrassed. So remembering that and thinking about the emotions that were perhaps connected to it, do they still play a part today in groups of large people if you're still feeling intimidated and shy, all because you fell down the stairs when you were 7, maybe that would give you the insight to look at the situation and perhaps reevaluate that maybe you didn't need that emotion there to protect you anymore.
Right, and that also goes without saying. There's some situations specifically that maybe you're not comfortable or it's not safe for yourself to process those emotions alone. So in those situations, you should maybe acquire a professional because, we're just talking, skinning your knee on the pavement, falling down the stairs, little things, a pet that passes on when you're 4 years old or whatever. But sometimes situations can be a bit more extreme than that, and we understand that. So you may want to seek a professional in those situations.
Yeah.
But as I was mentioning earlier, inner child, Mom's not seeing it on her social media, but I do. I find the inner child that we talk about today is often about gumdrops and rainbows, like go down a slide and relive your inner child. And sometimes I didn't realize, sometimes that's not where the inner child is always. And some people have bad memories as a child, and not everyone's childhood is perfect. So we also need to have those reflections of when we were younger as well, because your inner child can also lend you strength and regain wonder and optimism and joy in your life, and you can find a new self. You can regain your self-confidence, I guess is what I'm trying to say, by revisiting those situations when you were younger, and maybe some aren't very comfortable situations to process.
So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more, we just barely touched the tip of the iceberg there. If you want to find out more, a good place to start would be The Homecoming by John Bradshaw. I don't have it right here with me, but we had mentioned it earlier. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon or Chapters, that sort of thing. Neither of us are registered psychologists, so if reaching your inner child is too difficult, too big a task to deal with on your own, if you know there's some major stuff there that you need to process, please get guidance from a mental health professional.
Right. This podcast and this episode is just serving the purpose of maybe expanding your knowledge on inner child work. And I feel like we covered a lot in a short time. So also just processing the information or maybe re-listening to the episode might be helpful. But as Mom was mentioning, we're not psychologists. So if you have some deep-rooted inner child wounded things to go through, make sure you please reach out for professional help.
Sure.
Yeah. But on that note, thank you so much again for tuning in for another episode. We know this was a lot to process, and we're always open for feedback or questions even. And if we don't have the answer to those questions, we will try our darndest to find those for you. You can always reach out to us by email or by visiting our website. So yeah, thank you so much, and we will see you next Monday.
Bye.
If you or someone you know has a unique story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at theimperfectpodcast@outlook.com.
For more information and how to connect with us on social media, you can visit us at our website, theimperfectpodcast.ca.
And from whichever platform you are listening to this episode, be sure to like, share, and leave us a review. We would really appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
We look forward to hearing your feedback and seeing you all find that extra joy and embrace your own imperfect.
See you next week.